We will continue now with Miguel de Guzman. He's an architect and architectural photographer. He is founder and partner of Imagen Subliminal, together with Rocio Romero. It is an architectural photography and film company based in Madrid, New York, and their works, they are commissioned by important international architecture offices, construction and real estate companies. Their photographies has been published worldwide in print magazines as Architectural, El Croquis, Arquitectura Viva, Domus, Casabella, also the New York Times and El País. And they also collaborate with online media as Art Daily, Dizin, Design Boom, and Divisare. And one of their films that they worked on has been displayed at Maxi in Rome, at Centre Pompidou, and at Architecture Film Festival in New York, Los Angeles, and Budapest, Santiago de Chile, and Seoul. So it's good to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. I would like to start speaking about architectural visualization. That is our work, and I think it's a complex and almost impossible task, because it's about representing a three-dimensional space on a flat media, and especially in this case where the essence of architecture is space. So it's we're happy to work in such an impossible task and to take the most of it. Also because above all, we think architecture is a cultural construction that always is evolving, that new necessities identified by our clients, technical developments in construction, changing cultural, social and political context, individual proposals that echo and relate, allowing us to imagine the next step. We understand architecture as something beyond materiality, not just a game of light over the volumes. We understand it as a complex environment that includes in the design many social, economical, and political issues. We think architecture is an object and a developer and mediator of social relations, and that's what we like to communicate in our pictures. Through history, there has been an architecture with vanishing points, which coincides with the invention of perspective. There has been an architecture of models of foam, an architecture of Rhino or SketchUp, an architecture of the photography in black and white. And there's also, and it also interests us a lot, an architecture that is a moody, atmospheric architecture where the action, the experience is as important or more than the subject itself. Architecture that is building something that can not only be seen, but has to be lived. We also, for us it's very important to say, we work in architectural films, and that influences our way to have a bit of sound. And it influences our way of taking still pictures, and our way of taking still pictures also influences our way of shooting films. We think there's, through the years, like a language developed in a quite orthodox way related to architectural photography. There's like a set of rules that are like well known and well followed, but when we started to make architectural films, we discovered that there's a new language. There's something, some environment where we have the ability to break all the rules and try to discover new ones. No? So that is really important for us, like the ability to play and find new ways of communicating. We think the communication of architecture is fundamental in this process I spoke about before of cultural construction. I think the history of architecture coincides with that of the media that represents it. And you can imagine a project and the way you communicate it or the way you see it also influences in the way the architects think about the new projects. So it's like a two-way influence. We think our final goal is to have the views of our images to experience and understand what were the ideas behind those projects. Not only to see beautiful images, but to try to communicate what was the architect thinking or discovering where they designed the projects we are working on. We think of our work always in collaboration with the architect that commissioned the work for us. So we try to understand their ideas, the process, and try to build multiple layers of information to try to communicate everything in the best way possible. We work in all sorts of scales, from the large scale to the interior design, and I will try to bring here some of the strategies we think are important in our way of communicating in films as in architectural photography. We think about the three main elements that are the narrative, the characters, and the atmosphere. Speaking about narrative, is we make reference to a communication that is informal story in order to reinforce the experience, creating like order sequence of events. This allows us to interpret the structure and organize the architectural ideas that we are working with. We're going to use the narrative to communicate some ideas about the architect work. That, as I said before, there's always a processing of collaboration with the office we are developing the project, and to decide what ideas do we really have to tell the public. The existence of a story, or sort of a story, help us to grab the viewer's attention and to keep this flowing of spaces, of ideas, of social relations displayed in the images. Sometimes we have like a plot, sometimes we just introduce some elements so the story is understood but not always told as something concrete. Sometimes we evoke like the reality of the use of the building, sometimes we present parallels event that may happen at the building as the project was supposed to work. We sometimes we work with non-linear stories. We like create scenes so the viewer can complete in their mind like the story in the way it should be. Sometimes we capture real life. Sometimes we create scenes that evoke these real life events as if it were some kind of an architectural project on the project that we are working on. When we work with simulations, we usually make them really evident to the spectator. So everybody can notice it's either if we are working on a real event or we are like working on a stage event where we can speak about the ideas more than about the reality itself. We can introduce in just simple elements like this, like a sports car. We tell a lot of stories about where the building is, what's the environment of the building, what the social reality of this place is, or the other way around, like introducing nature in the building also creates a context in a way of developing a story about the building itself. The second element, the second strategy is working with characters. We think of a character as a narrator that provides background information that complements or spreads the images. It's like sorts of a host that accompanies you on the tour or the or shows how a building is used. Yeah, like that. That's great. So it's kind of an perceptual anchor element. Sometimes it draws attention but provides coherence to the story itself, and helps to understand what how a space works, especially when there's a complex relationship between elements. As I was speaking before, sometimes the characters are the real occupants of the building. Sometimes we stage this story as a theater that explains like this connection or disconnection between the architect's idea of how the project should be used and how it is used at times. As we are working in collaboration with the very close collaboration with the architects, we understand it's as important as the final result is the ideas behind that process. As I said, the character can be human. Sometimes it's just about, in a traditional way, showing the scale, how a building is used, in a very classic way sometimes, but always like introducing some kind of cultural element that helps situate this every kind of architecture. In other cases, it's like essential to have this character as a perceptual anchor where the space is not so recognizable without the human presence. And sometimes it's about the social environment of the building, where we can tell this building is a geriatric center, for example, having some of the actual occupants of this is a church, or when we play with the actual owners or occupants of the building, or we just introduce situations that could happen inside the space, or we try to tell some stories that the architecture makes make possible happen. Sometimes we go like a step more and we play with the surreal, and we play with the emotional part of the space itself, or with characters that doesn't have to be human. When some parts of the building become the character itself, or where the city or the environment takes a prime role in the story, or when objects really remind us of what's happening here. Or we introduce the character as in some way, like as a game, something joyful that takes part on the architecture story. This picture, for example, has a story. These are two projects by the same architect, Andres Jaque. This was his first work, like an interior design, and this was one of the latest works. It's a restaurant, and this kid is now this one. So we got the same guy to play 10 years afterwards, like the same story in a different building. Like it was this house is still like this because it's like a toy house. It's a house for a single guy where it's his first house, and it's like a playing house. So we had this kid playing around, and later on we have him doing the same in his own restaurant. The third part is what we call atmosphere. As the emotional side of architecture, where we can introduce the irrational feelings that happen when you feel or when you live an architecture. And this maybe for us the most important part, and at the same time the most difficult part. Because we are lucky as photographers to experience a lot of spaces, and we feel the responsibility to communicate what happens in there, how that building smells, how sounds, what the emotions, what relationship can happen in this place. So and also we understand that in an image or in a film, nothing, absolutely nothing is innocent. Everything provokes an emotion. So it's essential to control in the media what's going to happen, what kind of feeling is going to transpire from there. And here we can play with references. In this case, the architect was obsessed with the movie Blade Runner, and this is the architect herself. So we play this game with her. Also here, we, in this post-industrial site, we played with scenes from the movie Stalker, and we played with the atmosphere. We had to be there at 5 a.m. in a winter morning to catch the fog, but it was really important because it was part of the project from the beginning. This idea was in the architect's mind since the first sketch, so we had to try to communicate that. Sometimes it's about the weather, sometimes it's about the light, how different is a building in different lights. The atmosphere is changes with something that happens only 1 hour at a day, but it's the most important part of how it happens to be, how it should be. Sometimes we play with the atmosphere lens itself, introducing smoke. This is a smoked food shop, so we introduce the smoke. Sometimes it's like the sense of the environment, like trying to get the most of it. Sometimes it's how a building should feel according to the project, and how we feel it should be. Maybe it's recreating a scene, like a certain mood, playing with the colors, the color treatment, playing with the light situation. It's about the recreation of this irrational atmosphere. Because we think architecture photography is about the management of perception. We try to describe a whole world by means of partial pieces of information. We try to let the viewer complete the story. Our work is just giving clues to help in the construction of a reality behind the frame. It's like the important image for us is not the one we provide. It's the one that you can build up from it. It's how do you complete this information? How do you recreate what you don't see in the image, and how that works accordingly with the architect's idea. And last of it is to say, for us, experimentation is a really important thing. We really like to play with new toys. We like to always think about new ways of communicating architecture as a project by itself. So it's just now to show. Can we have sound? This one is important. A little sound in this one. Because we think architecture is evolving constantly. both in the techniques and both in the ideas. And it's important to keep up with that. It's important to, if an architect, for many architects, is most important than the bricks are the social relationship. We have to work with that. We have to find ways to tell that story. This is part of an exhibition project we worked with Andres Hake for the Storefront New York. It was a story about how the city had evolved in the last 10 years since serial Sex and the City started, and how different themes were told about like making visible things that change architecture, but that not but that kind of invisible. So here we worked with 360 images to make a movie. We did interviews in 360, and we then created an environment with a table for lectures and debates, with all this environment running around. This is another project it was about Mercamadrid, which is the most one of the biggest logistic centers of food in Europe. It feeds like 12 million people, and it was a way of telling how this clockwork industrial center functions during a day. So here there's like a superposition of different times, spaces, and movements in the center, all projected into one table. And this is some of the last experiments with artificial intelligence. No, this has no sound. That we just tried playing with. No? We think like there's always new tools, new ways to think about architectural images, and new games to play. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miguel. But if you have any questions.
Hi. I love that you're moving from photography to film, because I think it's a huge inspiration to many of us, like film, and the way it kind of informs the way we look at the world. And I wonder, what are your kind of like inspirations from cinema or from visual art, if you look up to some artist or something that's kind of like...
We really, when speaking about films especially, we really like to get contaminated by everything, because when we decided that we wanted to make architectural films, that was a couple of years ago, there was a way to show them, because there was internet, there was YouTube, there was social media, things like that. There was a way to show this kind of short films, no? And there was a public, and there were clients interested in it. But there was no real language for that. What we saw at the moment when we started were like still photographies in like slideshows. No? So we tried to think about how could it be. No? So we took a look at the fashion films, at commercials, and the video art, of course movies. So we try to play with everything. So if you see the films we have done, every film has some kind of experiment. Sometimes we repeat when we feel like something interesting, but we think there's like no set up language yet. So we feel free to get the ideas from anywhere, and we like that. It's like it's more fun. But we get ideas from anime or from And maybe it's more interesting that we get these ideas back and try to put them again into photography. So it's another way of trying to create some rules when we speak about architecture photography.
Thank you. If there are no other questions. But you already was having the microphone. Wanted to say some more. Okay, thank you so much, Miguel.